friend had a car that he really wanted to drive, and one day it just turned out to be his lucky day, and his friend finally gave in. He hopped in the driver's seat with his friend who owned the car in the passenger seat, and another buddy in the back, and off they went. They went to an empty freeway around 3 a.m. and put the pedal to the metal. Once they hit around 135 miles per hour, they began to see a bunch of semi-trucks. There were three basically driving side as fast as our speed demon friend. He thought to himself that there was an on-ramp coming up and he would just use that as some extra room to pass, but unfortunately as he approached the on-ramp, another semi was entering the freeway and occupying that fourth lane. With all four semis lined up, he was approaching too fast with no time to brake, so he closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. But then, nothing happened. He opened his eyes and the other guys in the car were just as confused as he was. Somehow they were now in front of all of the semis, but there was literally no room for them to pass by them. This was the end of his speeding career as he was super spooked as to what possibly just happened. Was this a real-world glitch, or did he somehow enter a reality where he wasn't in an extremely dangerous and potentially fatal situation?
Maybe he died, then his soul go into another him in another universe.
Super strange happened to them. The husband went to open the front door to toss a dirty rug out of the house, and it was just completely pitch black outside. The weird part is that it was at 2 p.m., and from inside the house, it looked like her body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery, and she wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with the medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I think I kind of might believe her too. In our number 6 spot today, we have moving. So this story comes from Reddit, and it starts off one day when a guy gets a call from his neighbors asking him if he can help them move a mattress upstairs. They had a good relationship with the neighbors, so of course he was willing to help. When he got there, they got the mattress all moved, and the neighbors asked if he wouldn't mind helping with the armoire as well. The problem he thought is he began to help them move that one upstairs as well. This is when things went awry, however. There were 11 stairs at the front. He was on the lower end carrying the armoire, and about 6 steps up, his friend at the top lost a handle on it, and the whole thing came crashing down on him since he was, of course, at the bottom. He loses his balance and falls backwards towards the pavement, and this man actually remembers dying from this fall. The next thing he remembers, though, is waking up in his dining room with his phone ringing and his wife asking him if he's going to answer the phone. He was obviously super freaked out because he literally just remembers dying 2 seconds ago, but now he's here. When he answers the phone, it's his neighbor asking if he can help move a mattress up the stairs. He surprisingly goes over again to help, and when he gets there, he says he can help with the mattress, but not with the armoire. The neighbor is shocked because he doesn't know how he could have possibly known about the armoire. Did the guy have some sort of premonition, or did his death in one reality bring him into a different one? Who knows, but I hope he's taking advantage of this second lease on life. In our number 5 spot today, we have the breath. This Reddit post comes from the user Cat22L, and they wrote, quote, "About 30 seconds ago, I was sitting on the couch as my dog walked by to go sit on her bed we have behind the L part of the sectional. She had something small caught in her throat last night, I think a popcorn shell, so I was paying attention to her breathing just to make sure she got it out. For a few minutes, she was breathing fine, and then what sounded like a light snore started happening. This is semi-normal for her depending on what position she's laying in, so I didn't bother to go over and check on her. That went on for about 5 minutes until the most disgusting, and to my now realization, terrifying, snore/cough/wheezing sounds started happening. I go over to her to make sure she's okay. At the exact moment I looked at her bed, the sound stopped mid-breath, and she wasn't there. She was outside with my parents and had been for around 30 minutes. There's no way to get out of the room without walking right past me. I don't know whose dog I saw and what was making that creepy-ass sound 5 feet away from me, but I'm going to be staying outside for the rest of the day and hiring an exorcist. Maybe this is a weird parallel universe story, or maybe this is just a full-on demon. What do you guys think? In our number 4 spot today, we have the road trip. One day in 2006, a woman named Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and she was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would be better off just continuing on her trip, and she left Riverside. Carol didn't return to Riverside until a few years later after her dad had passed away and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that somehow that day she ended up in some sort of a parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 3 spot today, we have the new location. So one day this person was driving to work on the same route that they took every single day. They worked the whole day through and got into their car to head back home on the same path. As they're driving, they start feeling super anxious and like on the verge of a panic attack. They keep driving and then they suddenly see this huge power plant all lit up. They're super confused because they drive this road every single day. Anna was of course overjoyed, but asked her mom why she had told her that Honey died. Anna's mom was very confused and said that that conversation never happened. After leaving her parents, Anna asked her boyfriend, and he said he was super glad that she brought it up because he also remembered this conversation. Did they somehow enter a world where Honey was still alive? Well, this would be such an amazing surprise. It would also be unbelievably creepy. In our number 1 spot today, we have the crosswalk. Okay, maybe a parallel universe story, maybe a glitch in the Matrix story. Either way, when I came across this one on Reddit, it actually gave me goosebumps because it was just so strange. So let me set the stage for you. The original poster of this story, for a few weeks prior to this incident, had been noticing this sort of mundane thing that he found that many people did. The thing was how pedestrians will wait at a crosswalk until the walk sign comes on, and when it does, he was finding that people will usually pull their cell phones out of their pocket and look at them as they walk across the street. Nothing too strange there, it was just a thing that he had noticed. So flash forward to this specific incident, this guy is driving with his daughter. He goes on to write, quote, "We stopped at a red light at a crossing and there was a man standing there. Nothing out of the ordinary, denim jacket, black cap, glasses, around 6'2". I thought I'd try to weird out my young daughter. She's 5, so I knew this was going to blow her damn mind. So I said, see that man? When the walking man goes green and he starts to walk across, he'll reach into his pocket and pull out his phone and start looking at it. Watch and see. As he walks across, he reaches into his pocket, but then immediately takes his hand out and looks and points right at me with his mouth open, smiling like a gotcha stance. Of course, my daughter found this absolutely hilarious, and I sat there completely mind blown. I must have sat there in silence looking at him walk across for the next 10 seconds. I drove on and had a look at him as I drove past, and he was smirking and laughing. Of course, I'm thinking that he must have heard this guy somehow, but the poster goes on to say that the windows were up, the radio was on, his voice was at a completely normal volume, and this crosswalk guy would have been like 15 to 20 feet away. He finishes the post by saying, quote, "I can't figure out at all how he could have heard me. It's literally impossible. How did he know I was trying to predict he'd reach into his pocket for his phone? The only even remote possibility I can think of is that he has had the same observation as me and thought I might be thinking the same thing, so he just went for it. But realistically, what are even the chances of this?" This story truly is just an incredibly weird one. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have 2 phones. This story had my mind absolutely blown, but when I looked at the replies, it was brought to a whole new level. This story reads, quote, "Okay, I know this sounds a bit crazy. So, to start off my story, my mom and dad are divorced and my dad just came to pick me up. But yesterday my mom got an infection somewhere in her lower abdomen. While my dad was driving to his house, my dad started to call my mom and she picked up. But they couldn't hear each other. So my dad hung up, but then like 20 seconds later we both got a call at the same time, but by 2 different numbers. We both answered, and on the other line was my mom. We started talking and she sounded the same, but like I said, they were 2 different numbers, and me and my dad are just sitting there looking at each other like, are we losing our minds? We started to talk to, quote, my mom, and she was saying 2 different things while we were both talking to her. And now, I don't know if I'm losing my mind or what. Okay, so I explanation for what could have happened there. Then I look at the replies because you know who always has explanations? Redditors. And one user replied with their theory that this is a case of a temporary reality slip or merge. Like, what in the world is that? My mind is blown. In our number 9 spot today, we have the nap. This wild story took place in 2022, and it starts off with the storyteller explaining that in that year, they took a nap and woke up in 2014. When they woke up, they were on the couch at their old job in their old uniform on a break. They knew something was wrong and that they were back in time, but to make matters weirder, they were like their 2020 self and what they look like currently, but they were in the year 2014, if that makes sense. From here they wrote, quote, I looked around and ran down the hallway when my manager stopped me and asked me what was wrong. I asked him what year it was and he said 2014. I insisted to him it was 2020. I ran up the stairs and everyone was looking at me. Everyone was acting like I'd worked there the last 6 years and nothing changed. Everyone asked me what was wrong. Then they head to the apartment that they lived in 2014 and it looked exactly the same and their parents were there who also confirmed that the year was 2014 and also began asking what was wrong and what was going on. This is when the story takes the craziest turn though. They open their bedroom door and their ex is lying in their bed, but this ex is also the current 2020 version of themselves, not the 2014 version, and they too have this awareness that they're back in time. They then went on to write, quote, they told me they, meaning the ex, brought me back. They were fully aware of what was happening. After talking for what felt like days in our old apartment, they left, and I went back to sleep in my own bed and woke up back in 2020 in my bed. I truly... Did somebody say, man, you know, we can't explain what on earth happened here, but it definitely is unbelievable. In our number 8 spot today, we have Parallel You. This strange story starts out with the storyteller setting the scene for us. They wrote, quote, this happened about 5 years ago when I lived with my parents. It was about 5 minutes after 8 a.m. and I had woken up, went downstairs and sat in the recliner. Dad was sleeping on the couch and Mom was in the kitchen cooking breakfast, biscuits and gravy. Everything was normal. Okay, this sounds like a great time so far, but just wait. They then explained that they moved from the recliner to the dining room, and then boom, suddenly they're at their friend Paul's house like they've been there the whole time. There are a couple other people there, and someone who's underneath a jacked up car working on it. This is when they write, quote, the guy underneath the car asked me to hand him the new muffler that was laying right beside where I was standing. I picked it up, I remember it had some weight to it, I recall the heat of the sun hitting me in the face. It was about 12.
Let's pause it. Let's go chill up there. Fair enough, baby daddy? Good girl. So let's push the roof. This here, this place here. So you roof right there. Yeah, pretty much. Cool. Come hold my hand. Sure. Press play.
1 o'clock in the afternoon, I knelt down to give him the muffler and the weight being lifted off when I handed it to him. It was just all so vivid. So now, when the storyteller went to stand back up, they heard this sound that was similar to the splash sound that occurs when somebody jumps into a pool. Immediately, the sound then went into reverse, and then there was a loud clap sound, and now they're back in their dining room. They go on to write, quote, I looked around, looked at the clock, and it was only 8:12. Dad was still on the couch. Mom was still cooking breakfast, and I went into the kitchen to ask her what that loud clap was. She gave me a puzzled look and said, what clap? I covered it up by saying it must have been on TV, and I sat back down trying to process what had just happened, knowing if I tried to tell her what happened that she might think I'm crazy. So I dropped it and moved on with my day as normal. I've never had anything like this happen before or since. They finish off their post by saying that they think they might have transported temporarily to their body in an alternate reality, and to be completely honest, I have no other ideas of what could have gone on here. In our number 7 spot today, we have Who Was That? Okay, I'm going to need your opinion on this one and what you guys think is going on here, because this one has me a bit confused. So, this post says, quote, this happened about 2 years ago. So my fiance and I were lying down in the living room. His face is facing towards me, and my face is towards him. My face is looking towards the wall behind him, and his face is towards the living room space. On the verge of waking up, up, my mom walks from the kitchen to her bedroom, in which you have to pass the living room in between. She asks, "Are you both okay?" asking for her bedroom. Not thinking much, my fiancé and I both answer, "Yes." In that moment, I got confused because I remember my mom telling me earlier in the morning that she was heading to town and she wouldn't be back until the afternoon. I get up from the couch, go to check her bedroom, and there is no sight of my mom anywhere. I told my mom about this, and she confirmed that she had been in town from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. My fiancé and I still talk about this to this day, and we are still freaked out about this. So my first thought was obviously a dream, but the fact that they both experienced it is the thing I can't get past. So what do you think happened here? Some sort of shared dream experience, something to do with parallel universes, some weird ghost thing? At this point, I have no idea. In our number 6 spot today, we have the train to nowhere. It doesn't matter what train you're on, where it is, or whether it's underground or above ground. When the doors close, everything is lawless. I feel like trains are always the portal to another world, and this story only proves my theory. This story reads, quote, 3 years ago I was riding a train. Got my ticket checked and took my seat. A few stops later, someone else turned up and seemed to have booked the exact same seat to the same destination. The same train conductor that checked my ticket earlier came, we compared our tickets, and it turned out I was booked on a non-existent train number with the same destination and time, but strangely enough, I had the same name as the one I shared a seat number with. Tried to check up on the number for my ticket afterwards and didn't get any hits for my actual train number. This is fully some platform 9 3/4 stuff that I cannot understand. In our number 5 spot today, we have Am I Really Here? Okay, this Reddit story starts off with the OP explaining that on February 20th, 2022, they dreamed that they were in a car accident. They then go into extremely vivid detail of the scenario that led up to the accident itself, and then the aftermath of it, and they could so viscerally feel all of the things as they were happening. Their car ended up in water, and they found themselves unable to escape, and they explained the thoughts that flashed through their mind of their family. Their phone was nearby, and they managed to call their girlfriend, who didn't answer, and they left one last voicemail. It's all very detailed and horrifyingly sad, and they end it by writing, quote, I remember crying to myself, trying to think of something else I could do to get out of this, to survive, but the water kept rising, and in the end, I simply stared up through it at the faint flashing light at the surface, blue and red. I prayed until my vision went black, and I couldn't fight to hold my breath any longer. And then I woke up, alone in bed, freezing with a cold sweat, but awake and confused. I don't know how or why I'm here, because I died. I felt my body die. I felt the water enter my lungs and the pain that it caused.
Although it's
I
a
felt
dream, maybe? Or a parallel universe?
So, this person thinks that they passed away in one reality and jumped into this one, where that was all just a terrible nightmare. That is horrifying. That would be the most terrifying experience ever. Was this just a very vivid nightmare, or an example of someone who jumped universes? In our number 4 spot today, we have The Real Me. Okay, this story is a bit of a longer one, but it's so worth it, I swear. It reads, quote, I was shopping at a thrift store in a small town I lived in several years ago. I was looking around and happened to be near the checkout counter. An old lady came out from the back and said, Are you? Said my name. I said, yes, figuring I'd worked with her or something in the past, although she didn't look familiar to me. My name is not super common anymore, although I do see it on personalized items on a very infrequent basis. Working at a certain school in a neighboring town about a half-hour away. I was confused and told her I'd never worked at a school in that town or any town. She appeared confused and stated that we had worked at the school together for a long time. I politely said that she must have me confused with someone else. She seemed like she was kind of scared at that point and again asked if my name was what she had stated before. I said yes, and she said, well, you look just like her. We chatted a bit about this other person, and I asked what this other person's last name was and gave mine. She said she didn't remember, but she could have sworn that I was her. We laughed about it, and I finished my shopping and left. I didn't think much about this till a few weeks later when I was walking down a street near my house. A woman, not the one from the thrift shop, came out of her house, saw me, and asked if my name was, said my name. I said yes. She also became excited and asked if I was still working at the school in the nearby town. I again explained that she must have me confused with someone else. She also said that I looked just like this other person with the same name, and she also didn't know the other woman's last name. This actually did creep me out. I've been mistaken for other people before, but not twice in the same month for a person who looks like me and has the same name with the same spelling. I think it is possible another reality crossed briefly with this one, and this was the result. No one has mistaken me for this woman since. You guys, imagine how strange that would be. I swear I wouldn't go anywhere ever again. In our number 3 spot today, we have the memories. Okay, this story starts off on June 16th, 2015. Our storyteller was really into visiting the skate park at this time and was on an out-of-town trip with their mom and ended up visiting a skate park while on this trip. While at the park, they unfortunately ended up getting in an accident that led to them being unconscious for a few minutes and having a few minor injuries, such as broken ribs. It definitely could have been worse, and they were lucky to walk away from the accident, but during their time unconscious, they experienced something that they refer to as the 7 minutes. During this period, they explained that their life flashed before their eyes and that they went through basically all of their memories and that it was black. When they woke up, after some time, they began to realize that while everyone looks the same, no one shares any of the same memories that they now have, the ones they saw during the 7 minutes. They have also stated that they now have this ability to feel when a family member dies, and as an example, they explained that they told their mother of their grandfather's death 20 minutes before she got the call. I think that would have been a really weird conversation, but once the phone call came, it was likely quite eerie. In our number 2 spot today, we have a bike ride to another universe. This is a story that I have no explanation as to what could have happened, but when I first read it, it gave me that shivery kind of feeling. It was posted on Reddit, and they wrote, quote, I was 11, maybe 12. We lived on this large piece of land in the desert with a truck repair shop on it. Most of the time, we'd hear the mechanic tinkering away in the shop, or our neighbor would be sitting out on his step. In the summer of 2013, I rode my bike out to the back of the property. There was a big hole with sheet metal covering it, and I liked to ride my bike across because it would make an awesome thunder-like noise. I had done it hundreds of times, but this time it was different. I rode across, and when my bike tires touched the dirt, I immediately felt different. Everything felt too silent. Everything felt static, like it was frozen. Like if I tried to move anything, it wouldn't move. I was honestly too nervous to ride back to my house. I felt like I would show up and everyone would be gone, just missing. No people, no animals. I took a 15-minute break and just pedaled back. I always think about this. Maybe the vibration from the sheet metal was enough to create some sort of disturbance. Maybe being off in the back of the property by myself, but I loved doing that because nobody bothered me while I rode my bike. I never had any other experiences like that, and every time I went back to that part of the property, I would take my dog with me on a leash so I wouldn't be all alone. What do you guys think happened here? In our number 1 spot today, we have Breakfast in a Parallel Universe. Breakfast at Tiffany's or Breakfast in a Parallel Universe, this Reddit story honestly could be the plot of a movie. The Redditor wrote, quote, my husband and I bought a country house, a place that we go to and work on most weekends. It's in a small town in Texas.
Your room,
One weekend we
the
happened upon a
kitchen,
restaurant that we had never
the
noticed
lounge
before.
room,
We entered and I remembered an
bathroom,
older man, another customer
or out
with a
here
cowboy hat on,
on the
said,
balcony,
you can just seat yourself.
or
So
out
we
in
made
the
our way to
public
a little
pool,
table that was open in the
down
middle of the
there.
busy restaurant. We ordered breakfast, ate, and left. Everything seemed normal. 1 or 2 weeks later, we tried to find the same restaurant and never could find it. We drove all around the town
Fucking
and
my
each of
room.
the roads out of
Cool.
town and never found it. The building where I could have sworn it was boarded up and abandoned. The building looked the same but long deserted. I feel like this could either be like a cool drama or an awesome eerie thriller, but either way, this story would have had me extremely confused and questioning a lot of things. It's crazy that we both experienced the same thing because it takes away a ton of other possible explanations. Starting off in our number 10 spot with the cornfield. This story is about how someone believes that they may have somehow accidentally ended up in a universe similar to the one that they're used to, but this new one has just small changes that are beginning to freak them out a bit. They explain, quote, so I live by a cornfield and have noticed small changes in my world, and the most major change I noticed just hours ago was that my entire house was on the other side of the street. I go home from school the same way every day. I end up going down my road, then turning right into my driveway. Today, I went home the exact same way, but when I was getting ready to turn right, I noticed a cornfield. So I pull over to see what happened, then I turned around and noticed my house was on the completely opposite side of the road. I think my world is changing more than I first thought. Has something like this happened to anyone else? Okay, definitely a little suspicious, but maybe they just got something mixed up. Then they go on to tell this story. Quote, I had just gotten out of the grocery store and was pushing my cart towards my car when all of a sudden I looked down and the cart was gone. I looked around and I wasn't even in the store parking lot anymore. I was in a parking lot of an apartment complex that my best friend moved out of years ago. And the other thing that was freaky was my car keys were completely different. To be exact, they were the keys to my car that I had in 2015. I looked around, panicked, and actually saw my old car. I had a rubber duck on the dashboard of that car and the same duck was there. I remember feeling my stomach drop and an overwhelming feeling of dread at this realization. This was a horrible time in my life and I would do anything to not have to relive it. Then my ears started ringing and my head started hurting like a migraine was coming on, so I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back in the grocery store parking lot with the correct keys in my current car. I can't explain this and I'm still confused by this. I'm confused by this and I didn't even have to live it. I can't even imagine. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Cuddy effect. This is one story that might be a parallel universe story, or maybe it's one sign of the Mandela effect. I'm wondering if anyone else shares this same memory with this person, so once you hear the story, let us know down below in the comments. We all know how often it happens that someone will start circulating a fake death claim about a celebrity on the internet. It happens all of the time for some morbid reason. The storyteller explains that they know this and assure all of us that this is not the case in their situation. They say that they remember the artist Kid Cudi passing away sometime in 2018 or 2019. They say that they can remember seeing it on the news and it being shared on social media and everyone was really upset. So flash forward to just a couple of days ago when they hear their sister talking about the new Kanye West and Kid Cudi drama that has been going on, and they say it's weird that Kanye would have beef with Cudi since he died. This is when they go on to Google it and realize now that they can't find any news on Kid Cudi passing away, and that is of course because whatever timeline we're in, that never happened. It would definitely be a conflicting feeling to have this clear memory that you swear is real, but everything around you is telling you it's not. In our number 7 spot today, we have the missing typewriter. This story comes from Reddit, and they write, quote, as a kid I remember having a typewriter, and I remember I used to love typing nonsense on it, pretend files and telegrams. A few years ago, I bought a typewriter from eBay, and I asked my mom about that typewriter, and she had no idea what I was talking about. I asked my dad, and he had no idea. I asked my cousins who I remember using it with, and they had no idea. I remember so well, it's frightening. That was years ago. I still don't understand. I also remember a few other things like having a desk and chair in my bedroom. Also, no one remembers that. And there are many pictures of me in my room as a kid, yet none exist of these little memories I have. Is it possible I passed through a parallel universe after my childhood? Does anyone else have childhood memories that never happened? Childhood items that never existed? That's a great question. I had a teddy bear called Ears that my dog destroyed one year, but if I call my dad and find out that he never existed, I would be pretty confused. It's a small thing, but I can totally understand why this would be a very weird feeling. In our number 6 spot today, we have an alternate world. This story starts off with them explaining that ever since they were a teenager, they dreamed of this alternate life they have where they go to university and work in the city. It started around age 16 and they are now 25. They say that this other life is really detailed, like it basically is like living an entirely other life. They then go on to write, quote, last night I was feeling sick and in return had one of the most vivid dreams I had in a long time. I met someone and developed a deep relationship that felt incredibly emotional and real. Luckily, I woke up right when I was trying to navigate Google Maps to drive to a park, so I remember the street we were on. It was called Dutch Island Road. Never heard of it in real life, so I decided to look it up. The only thing that popped up was a rural area in Rhode Island. It wasn't exactly the same layout of roads I remembered on the map, but the nature and area looked eerily similar to what I saw while driving. I started looking around the area, clicking different locations, and started to freak out at how everything looked just like in my dream. Mind you, I've never been to Rhode Island, but the weirdest part is that specific buildings in the Rhode Island University and Warwick are the ones I see in my dream all the time. What? How could they have so accurately dreamed of something they had never seen in real life? They go on to say, quote, I've always thought my dreams were a glimpse of living in an alternate universe, and I feel like this detail solidifies the potential of it being a reality. In our number 5 spot today, we have New Year, New World. This story is one that starts off with a bang. Quite literally. It starts off on New Year's Eve 2020 when the storyteller was about to leave work and fell down a flight of stairs. They broke their nose when it hit the concrete stair, and despite this obviously terrible injury, they explained that they think they actually died in their old universe and somehow transferred over into this one where they were able to survive their injuries. They say they started to notice slight changes, like the masks they were wearing when the fall occurred. They remember being filled and basically ruined with blood from their injury, but suddenly they'd find this mask in their bag, perfectly clean with no evidence of the fall. Also, the spot where the fall occurred clearly hadn't been cleaned due to the presence of other dirt and debris, but following the incident, there was no blood there either. This is especially weird considering the steps were concrete, so you think that there would be some sort of evidence. They go on to write about how they then began to notice small changes in those around them, with the biggest one being in reference to their mom. When they were a child, they remember their mother having breast cancer and thankfully being able to overcome it. After the fall, and when they believed they transferred universes, they were speaking to their mother on the phone and somehow got on the topic when their mother seemed really confused and explained that she had never had cancer or really anything of the sort. They remember it so well, they even remember passing notes about it to their friends in class and worrying about it for months. They were, of course, happy to hear that their mother's healthy, but how could they possibly have this memory too? It's definitely all very strange. In our number 4 spot today, we have Somehow. This story comes from Reddit, and they quickly start off by explaining that somehow, suddenly, they don't know when or how it happened, but they just woke up in a universe that wasn't their own. They have a few examples of how they know this. Some are a little more bizarre than others, but they're all examples nonetheless. So basically, they start by explaining that a statue in their town isn't where they remember it being. The next example is that they remember harvest mites or berry bugs, and they remember and have actually had multiple occasions of them burying themselves into their skin, but in our timeline or universe, that isn't what those bugs do. Those were the more out there reasons, but the others consist of memories they have of childhood that have never happened, a movie they used to watch a bunch of times no longer existing anymore, and now they are suddenly friends and acquaintances with a bunch of people they never even met before. Certain things about their wife are different, including the ring she wears, and some foods are tasting different to them. It seems as though one day they woke up in a slightly altered universe from the one they were living in before. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Cemetery. This story comes from Reddit, and it was posted with the title, quote, "I think my kids and I may have traveled to an alternate universe." They write about how a couple months ago, they and their kids were walking through and around a cemetery. Their children are 13 and 9, and during their little walk, they ended up heading through the entire cemetery, and they came across a small, beautiful mausoleum. They remember it so well that they even noted how the last person to be placed within the mausoleum happened about 50 years prior. So then, a few weeks later, they were walking through the cemetery again with their kids, but this time they brought their mom as well. I know, I'm also questioning why this family likes to take strolls through a cemetery, but they do say that they do this to ground them. Anyway, the kids began to tell their grandmother about the mausoleum they saw last time and asked if they could show her and visit it again. But when they go and try and find the mausoleum, it isn't anywhere. They search for at least half an hour, and with no luck, they ask someone who helps tend to the area, and he says that no such thing exists. They say that the cemetery is small enough that there should be no issue locating it, but it just doesn't seem to exist at all anymore. Both she and her kids remember what it looked like so clearly, so how could it have just disappeared? Now they've got me thinking that this mausoleum was somehow a portal to another reality. In our number 2 spot today, we have The Eclipse. This story originally took place in 2017 during the eclipse. The storyteller is located in Virginia, and based on that, they wouldn't get to experience the total eclipse, but would see some of it. They go on to write, quote, "I had just gotten off of work and entered my apartment. The time was 2:15 p.m., and the eclipse wouldn't happen for another half hour. I decided to change my clothes and take a quick nap. I set an alarm clock for 20 minutes and drifted off to sleep. I also want to note that I was living on my own. When I woke up, it felt like at least an hour had passed. I was really disappointed because I wanted to experience the eclipse. I looked at the time on my phone, and no time had passed. It was 2:20 p.m. I thought I'd stay awake instead and sit on my porch, but when I had gotten out and sat down, I noticed it was dead quiet. Nothing. I heard no cars, I saw no neighbors, I didn't see a single bird. I wasn't asleep. I tested it. I left my apartment and my complex and nothing. I walked to the stores across from me and they were all closed. There was no wind rustling through the leaves on the trees. I could not even find an ant. I tried to call people on my contact list and everything went to voicemail. It was as though every living being stopped existing. Throughout my adventure, the eclipse darkened and lightened the sky. I went back home. I sat on my couch. The rest of the day continued. I went to sleep that night. When I woke up, it was 3 p.m. on the same day. The eclipse had just ended. I missed my alarm. It was like it never happened. I've been waiting to tell this story for the longest. I have no idea where I was, but that place was just as real as this dimension. I don't know where they went, but they swear it wasn't of this earth anymore. Whether it was another planet, another dimension, or something else entirely, I'll never know. Maybe it was just a really strange and vivid dream
Star Wars capsule. Even some of the biggest Star Wars fans in the world might not know that there is a secret Star Wars time capsule somewhere out there. It's buried at Skywalker Ranch in California. It was put there by Star Wars creator George Lucas. He put it in the corner of the building and filled it with secret artifacts from the Star Wars movies. George was once asked, when would this time capsule be opened? And he said, never. Literally never. Well, not quite never, but he wants it to be discovered in the distant future by archaeologists. This is bad news for die-hard Star Wars fans out there who are really hoping to one day see the priceless contents of this time capsule. Moving on now to number 9, we have the Millennium Time Capsule. Now, as you guys might guess from the name, this time capsule was buried at the turn of the millennium in the year 2000. It was sealed by the White House and contains a number of culturally significant items from history. These include a CD, photos of Earth from space, a computer chip, a World War II helmet, a cell phone, a piece of the Berlin Wall, and even a photo of Rosa Parks. There's also a pair of Ray Charles sunglasses, because, you know, why not? For me, though, the most interesting thing they put in there might actually be Twinkies. Yeah, an actual pack of Twinkies. However, I also read that the Twinkies were later removed because they were attracting mice. I guess people in 1,000 years will know a lot about our world, but almost nothing about Twinkies. What a shame. Next up at number 8 now, we have the largest time capsule. The town of Seward, Nebraska, claims to have the world's largest time capsule. It was constructed by local store owner Harold Keith Davison, who wanted his grandchildren to know what his life was like when he buried it in 1975. The 45-ton vault was buried under a mound of dirt on the front lawn of his appliance store. It's packed with artifacts from his own life and also general items from the 1970s. The most striking item has to be his Chevy Vega car, which still sits inside the vault to this day. Moving on now to number 7, we have the Westinghouse time capsules. These are a pair of time capsules prepared by the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company. The first one was buried for the 1939 New York World Fair and contained fabrics, metals, plastics, literature, art, and news events from the time recorded on microfilm. The capsules are intended to be open in the year 6939, a full 5,000 years after they were buried. In that distant future, our language and culture may be so different that whoever finds the capsule may not know what to do with any of the items inside. This is why the creators of the time capsule included detailed instructions on how to make a microfilm viewer and also a projector for the newsreels. I'm sure the future humans will really appreciate that. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Helium Centennial Time Columns Monument. This was constructed in 1968 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the discovery of helium. The time capsule is actually made up of 4 different parts. The different parts are supposed to be open after 25 years and 50, then 100, and then 1,000 years. The first 2 have already been opened, but the third will not be open until the year 2068, and the final one until the year 3068. Now that last capsule contains a passbook for a $10 savings account from an Oklahoma City bank, which draws 4% interest every year. After 1,000 years, it will be worth over $1 quadrillion. So, definitely worth the wait. Next up at number 5 now, we have Keo. Technically, Keo isn't a time capsule yet, but for me, it's too interesting to not include on this list. Keo is a proposed space time capsule which was intended to launch back in 2003. It would be set on a course that would lead back to Earth 50,000 years in the future. It sounded like the perfect time capsule. It will be out there drifting in space without ever being tainted or ruined by people here on Earth. And what would the world look like when it finally landed again in 50,000 years? Well, fans of the project have been left wondering those questions. The project was delayed until 2006, then to 2007, then 2008, then 2010, and basically every year since then. Currently, the Keo website cites 2009 as its launch. They're inviting every person in the world to contribute to their capsule. They're looking for people to post messages to the people living 50,000 years in the future. They promise that every message will be included without any censorship. Although Keo has been delaying its launch now for over 15 years, many people still send their messages to them just in case the project ever does go ahead. Moving on now to number 4, we have the CN Tower. Some of you may be surprised to learn that our channel is based in Toronto, Canada. Perhaps the most iconic landmark in this city is the CN Tower. Standing at over 1,800 feet, it's towered over the city since its completion in 1976. To mark the occasion, a time capsule was placed at the very top of the tower inside the walls of the lookout level. It's intended to be opened in the year 2076, a century inside the contents contain a letter from former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, letters from school children at the time, copies of 3 newspapers, Canadian coins and bills, and even a video about how the tower was constructed. Isn't that nice? Next up at number 3 now, we have the Crypt of Civilization. This is a sealed, airtight chamber from 1940 at Oglethorpe University in Georgia. The 2,000 cubic foot room contains many artifacts from the time, including everyday items, famous books, voice recordings of people such as Franklin Roosevelt or Adolf Hitler, and even a sound recording of Popeye. Don't know why. The time capsule was thought up by Thornwell Jacobs, who felt that there was so little information available from ancient civilizations and that someone had to make sure that this never happened again. He stated that because the ancient Egyptian calendar was established 6,177 years